Bible prophecy is active and unfolding daily. Zechariah 12, Isaiah 17, Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38. Here is what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Shalom, my friends. Welcome to this week's newscast. ISIS continues to plant itself throughout the United States, my friends. From the Washington Post, federal prosecutors have charged 73 men and women across the country in connection with ISIS. So far, 22 have been convicted, and the FBI says that in a handful of cases, it has disrupted plots targeting the U.S. military and law enforcement personnel as well. From CBS News, Abdul Malik Abdul Karim of Arizona, already accused of helping plan an attack on a Prophet Muhammad cartoon contest in Texas, had researched traveling to the Middle East to fight along ISIS and inquired about the types of explosives that would be needed to blow up a mall and the Phoenix Stadium where the 2015 Super Bowl was held. From Ynet News, CNN and CBS television networks failed to make a distinction between victims and attackers, simply reporting on 4 killed in a deadly stabbing attack in Jerusalem. CNN reported, quote, 4 die in violent stabbing at Jaffa Gate, close quote, while CBS went with the headline, quote, 2 Palestinians killed after stabbing attack in Jerusalem, close quote. This is neither the first nor the second such example of anemic LameStream Media reporting, combining the 2 murders with the 2 victims into 4 dead is not only dishonest and unethical journalism, but it also borders on incitement, since viewers can very easily and most likely misinterpret the truth. Reporting 4 dead can only suggest that the person who wrote that headline has a clear and obvious political agenda. Further, an Associated Press headline ignored the Israeli deaths completely and cast the attackers as victims. Just one more example, my friends, of what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Now, today is my final newscast for 2015, and what a year it has been. ISIS was birthed with the first blood moon of 2014, and with the final blood moon this year, ISIS is an established threat worldwide. Same-sex marriage was also established this year. Look at Matthew 24:37, where Yeshua says, "The coming of the Bane of Adam, the Son of Man, Yeshua HaMashiach, will be just like the days of Noah." Now, in the days of Noah, we had Sodom and Gomorrah, and same-sex marriage, homosexuality was rampant, even to the point where in the city square they had beds out in public where men could grab young boys and have their way with them. And all that was promoted, you might say, by the court systems and the judges. Same thing today. Same-sex marriage, homosexuality, all being promoted, okayed by the court systems and the judges. So it is as it was in the days of Noah right now. Further, Iran has a green light for going full speed ahead with its nuclear program. The U.S. dollar is nearly worthless and soon to crash. The U.S. military has been reduced to almost nothing. And America, as a world power, no longer existent. The third Intifada has been birthed and is growing. Canada no longer supports Israel and has a Muslim prime minister in charge now. And England now has more Muslim mosques than it has Christian churches. More Muslims than Christians. England. The U.S. Department has charged at least 60 individuals this year with terrorism-related crimes, an unprecedented number that officials attribute to a heightened threat from ISIS and the influence of social media on potential recruits. More than 55% of those charged are under 25 years old, and about 1/3 of those are under 21 years old. 2016 is just a couple of days away. New Year's resolutions? You know, I'm happy to tell you that in my lifetime, I have never, not once, made a New Year's resolution. You know, that idea always struck me as really odd. Did you make your New Year's resolution? What's your New Year's resolution? Why wait? If you have something that's going on in your life that you need to vow to make a change about, what's the new year got to do with it? Oh, this year it's going to be different than last year. I don't think so. You know, most New Year's resolutions, I imagine, were probably forgotten within hours. You know, as in 24 or 78, whatever. New Year's resolutions, silly thing to attempt. Turning to wars and rumors of wars. On Tuesday, December 22nd, from Ynet News, the heads of Hamas's military wing are focusing on preparing for the next war against Israel, and they are not going to listen to the political leadership in the next round of fighting. They will, once again, try to launch simultaneous attacks on several targets inside Israel. At the same time, Hamas is working on building up its stockpiles to allow for continued rocket fire over a period of many weeks. Some 10 tons of iron oxide, which is used for rocket propulsion, have been seized at the Kerem Shalom crossing, enough for 20,000 rockets. In addition, 6.3 tons of aluminum oxide, enough for 620 rockets, and 4 tons of graphite, enough for 1,300 rockets, have been seized at the crossing. From BBC News, at least 5 people were killed in a suspected chemical weapons attack outside the Syrian capital, Damascus. The victims reportedly suffocated to death after government rockets and barrel bombs struck the rebel-held suburb of Muadhamiyah. And on Thursday, December 24th, from U.S. News and World Report, a U.S.-backed coalition of rebels in Syria, including Syrian Kurdish, Arab, and Christian groups, captured several areas in the country's north from ISIS extremists as government air raids on a rebel-held Damascus suburb killed at least 20 people. Government warplanes and helicopter gunships struck the suburb of Hamariyah, which has recently been subjected to intense government airstrikes, as have other opposition-held areas near the Syrian capital, Damascus. Then on Friday, December 25th, from the New York Times, Zahran Aloush, commander of the Army of Islam, one of the most powerful Syrian insurgent groups, was killed in a Russian airstrike in the suburbs of Damascus. From Haaretz, the Army of Islam numbers over 20,000 soldiers with 26 branches around Syria. In 2014, it merged into the Islamic Front, which represents most of the Islamic militias that are fighting to remove the Assad regime. Despite its radical religious agenda, the Army of Islam is considered one of the moderate Islamist groups with which the U.S. is willing to cooperate. Russia, in contrast to the position of the Obama administration, does not make any distinctions between the moderate Islamic groups and those considered to be more extreme. To Russia, the only legitimate rebel groups are the Free Syrian Army and the Kurdish militias, which it assists by providing arms and intelligence. Saudi Arabia and Turkey support the Army of Islam. On Saturday, December 26th, from the Los Angeles Times, ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi directly threatened Israel. Quote, Baghdadi said, "No, O Jews, we did not forget Palestine for one moment. Soon you will hear the crawl of the Mujahideen, and their vanguards will surround you on a day you believe is far, but that we see is close. Palestine will be your graveyard." Close quote. Then on Monday, December 28th, from the Iraq Sun, security forces took control of a government complex in Ramadi that has been a stronghold for ISIS in the government's push to retake the devastated city. The complex is under complete control, with no presence whatsoever of Daesh fighters in the complex. A victory by Iraqi forces would make Ramadi the second city after Tikrit to be retaken by the government in Baghdad. Turning to our Intifada update. From the Washington Post, young Palestinians with kitchen knives are waging a ceaseless campaign of near-suicidal violence. There have been about 120 attacks and attempted assaults by Palestinians against Israelis since early October, an average of more than one a day. At least 20 Israelis have been killed. More than 80 Palestinians have been shot dead by security forces and armed civilians during those assaults. The attacks appear to be spontaneous and opportunistic, poorly planned and badly executed, although often deadly. The most common weapon is a kitchen knife, while the second most common is the family car. And if the death of an Israeli is what the Palestinian assailants seek, the attacks are often failures. Most victims survive. A survey released on Monday, last week, December 21st, by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research in Ramallah found that 2/3 of all Palestinians support the knife attacks. On Tuesday, December 22nd, from Ynet News, the Jerusalem municipality has begun erecting steel columns to shield some 300 bus stops around the city to prevent terrorists from committing car ramming attacks on those waiting for buses. And on Wednesday, December 23rd, from the Times of Israel, 3 Israelis were stabbed by 2 Palestinians at Jaffa Gate in Jerusalem's Old City. 2 of the Israelis died, one from the stabbing and the other from gunfire when border guards shot and killed the 2 Palestinian terrorists. Then from Ynet News, 25 Palestinians, many of them students at the Abu Dis University near Jerusalem, have been arrested for planning to carry out suicide bombings in Israel. The cell was headed by a 24-year-old from Qalqilia who was trained by Hamas in Gaza to manufacture explosive belts. From the New York Times, Palestinian security forces arrested 2 Islamic radicals who set fire Wednesday to a Christmas tree in a Christian-majority village near Jenin in the northern West Bank. A Palestinian security officer said that security forces also arrested a dozen radical Islamists in Bethlehem on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, December 24th, from Ynet News, 2 Israeli security guards were wounded in a stabbing attack at an industrial zone near Ariel in the West Bank. The guards shot and killed the Palestinian terrorist. From the Jerusalem Post, a Palestinian terrorist attempted to stab an Israeli soldier at a checkpoint in the Mount Hebron area of West Bank. The attacker was shot dead by IDF soldiers. Also, a Palestinian tried to run over soldiers and border police officers at Ramah, north of Jerusalem. The attacker was shot and 1 soldier was injured. From Ynet News, a 20-year-old and a 23-year-old, both residents of northern Israel, were charged on Thursday with supporting ISIS and planning a terror attack in the Galilee. They traveled to Turkey last May, where they met with an ISIS operative and tried to enter Syria. Then they met refugees who told them the horrors happening in Syria, which led them to return to Israel. The 2 then started planning a terror attack in Israel on IDF soldiers and, to that end, sought to purchase arms. On Saturday, December 26th, from Haaretz, an Israeli soldier was wounded in a car ramming attack in Hawara in the West Bank. The assailant was shot and killed. And earlier on Saturday, a knife-wielding Palestinian was shot dead after he attempted a stabbing attack in Jerusalem. On Sunday, December 27th, from Ynet News, an IDF soldier was stabbed in the back on Sunday morning near Jerusalem's central bus station. The terrorist tried to stab him a second time, but the soldier fought back and pushed his attacker to the ground. A security guard helped to overcome the terrorist. Then, 2 IDF soldiers were wounded on Sunday afternoon in a stabbing attack by 2 Palestinians at the Hawara checkpoint in the West Bank. The soldiers shot and killed both attackers. From Jerusalem Post, Israeli security forces arrested a Palestinian woman on Sunday morning who tried to stab a security guard at the gate of Ma'ale Shamron, a Jewish village in the West Bank. And to review last week's news, reports of ISIS terrorist activities in America are increasing. Heads of Hamas's military wing are focusing on preparing for the next war against Israel. At least 5 people were killed in a chemical weapons attack outside Damascus. A U.S.-backed coalition of rebels in Syria captured several areas from ISIS as government air raids on a rebel-held Damascus suburb killed at least 20 people. Zahran Aloush, commander of the Army of Islam, was killed on Friday in a Russian airstrike in the suburbs of Damascus. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi directly threatened Israel, saying, No, O Jews, we did not forget Palestine for one moment. Soon you will hear the crawl of the Mujahideen. Security forces took control of a government complex in Ramadi. The Jerusalem municipality has begun erecting steel columns to shield some 300 bus stops around the city to prevent terrorists from committing car ramming attacks on those waiting for buses. There were 9 Palestinian stabbing attacks. 2 Israelis died, 1 Israeli was wounded, and 5 Israeli security guards were wounded. There were 2 Palestinian car ramming attacks. 2 soldiers were injured, and 27 Palestinians were arrested for planning suicide bombings. And that, my friends, is what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Abba willing, I'll see you here again next year. Until then, stay safe. Shalom. I consume. Enough is time alone with you, underneath the naked moon, sharing confidential moods and making chatter. Mockingbird nocturnal sings notations of eternal things, entering the quantum breeze, flying not for want of wings. He lights his gaze on you and me, simply because we matter.